Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Scott.
I'm Shatay, and we're the Hazes.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we are.
Welcome back to the Love Haze podcast, where we believe that healing and wholeness are not just destinations that you arrive to.
Absolutely not. We believe their journey, and here, right here,
Right here, cuz?
we talk about how we navigate through it.
Absolutely. Today, we're going to be talking about triggers, how to identify them, how to deal with them as they come.
Yep.
And we appreciate y'all just joining us on our Black love journey. Let's get into it.
There you go. Okay, so triggers. The thought that we are working with today is when I'm hysterical, it's historical. And let me tell you all where this came from. So we love our Black love shows, right? We watch all of them. Put a Ring on It, Black Love documentary, Ready to Love, Love in Huntsville, Marriage. So wait, Love and Marriage, Huntsville, and it's on OWN. Shout out to OWN and Will Packard, all them doing great shows. After one of our shows, and I can't recall which one it is, any one of the ones we just named, Family or Fiance comes on, and we kind of watch it sometimes, but not all the time. But if it just comes on after our Black love show, we happen to catch it. Tracy McMillan is the therapist on staff. I'm not sure if she's considered a therapist, but I think her title on the show is like relationship coach. She's also the author of a book I read years ago, and I think I learned about her from Super Soul Sunday, which I love. Oprah talking about books and to the authors is like my jam, and it's about spirit. Another subject for another day. She has this book, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. Why You're Not Married, ... yet. The straight talk you need to get the relationship you deserve. And she's really about holding people accountable for their own mess, how they can work through it in their relationship. And that's what she does on the show. So in the show, they have some individual sessions. They have some exercises they have to do with their families. And at the end of the show, like they have to basically, based on the work that they've done, hopefully get their family's best blessing to get married. Well, in one of these episodes, in one of the sessions for the couple, something that happened at the dinner on the first night, which it always does. There's some drama ensues,
Always some drama.
People cussing each other out or crying or whatever. And in the session the next day, I think when they were reflecting on it or processing it, or I'm not whatever happened, she said that line to them, and Scott and I both were like, woo, that was a whole word. She said, when I'm hysterical, it's historical. And immediately we wrote it down. I was like, we got to unpack that in some type of way. And so that's what we're doing today. And at the essence of that is the idea of triggers.
Right.
Like it's coming from somewhere. Your behavior, your response to this thing is a lot bigger than the situation warrants. And so that means there's some type of something, some type of baggage, some type of backstory that needs to be uncovered here. So can you tell us, Mr. Mental Health Professional, what exactly is a trigger?
So really in mental health terms, a trigger really refers to something that affects your emotional state.
Okay.
It is, well, I'll say it affects your emotional state significantly. If you think about it in regular terms, it can cause you some amount of distress.
Okay.
And the part of the definition that I really like and what I hold on to is it keeps you from being able to be present.
Ooh. Okay.
Right. So you can't really focus on your present because you're thinking about this thing that has happened.
Yeah.
Right. So it's some external thing that happens or internal thing that happens that causes you some level of emotional distress.
Does everyone's response to a trigger, are they always the same? Like what are some type of responses that people can have to being triggered by something?
It's a multitude of things. So, when we talk about this idea of like healing and dealing with past traumas, and when you get to a certain stage of healing, your hope should always be that when things trigger you, that it will just only cause you maybe some discomfort, or maybe there's just like this recognition that something happened and it reminded you of something else, right? When it gets to the point of eliciting a trauma response.
Trauma response. That's a
Mhm.
professional term there, sir.
um, it means that you're operating from that old space,
Yeah.
right? You remember that trauma and you're responding to that trauma. So a lot of us hope that when we get into therapy, or even when we don't get into therapy, when we consider ourselves as having gotten over something,
Yeah.
that we'll never be triggered by it again.
Child.
And so our reality for the most part is that we'll always be triggered by, some things, because we talked about in season 1, I think, about how, if I fall off my bike, I remember, I can see the scar still, right? So
Yeah.
my healing is doesn't mean that I don't, remember. It means that I'm aware. I'm aware that this thing happened. I remember it. And to some degree, I want to remember, because I want to remember to be safe and not go down that road again. But a trigger can mean that it's something that reminded me,
Yeah.
of the thing that happened before I fell off my bike. Right. And so we have to remember that we can always be triggered by something, but it's about your response to the trigger. Like, and our hope is always that we develop some type of tools, some type of coping mechanisms to have ready to access. So when I'm triggered, I know what to do to cope.
Can we stop for a moment and
Mhm.
maybe I've never fully processed this thought before, but you saying we can always have triggers or always be triggered by a thing, even after we feel like we've gotten over it, always I feel a way about the word always, because I'm the type of person that I don't like to revisit things over and over. And we've talked about this a couple times. You got about a good 2 or 3 times before I'm gonna be like, okay, what you gonna do about it? I can't keep processing the same thing over and over, because I don't like to be in the same space. I want to move forward. I like to evolve. That's why my spirit animal is a butterfly. Like, I can't always be in this mess. So the idea of potentially always being triggered by a thing feels problematic to me. And I guess I'm just caught off guard, like, wow. And it makes sense because we talk about it. Like, I wasn't expecting to be triggered by this thing, and yet I was. And I guess to me, I thought, like, eventually, if you keep doing the work, whatever that means to a person, that they would go away. But what I'm hearing is, like, even if you continue to do the work, it might always be there. Just like I got this scar, y'all. You can't see it really. From when I did this when I was like 6. Like, I was outside on a patio and there was a dirty nail on the thing, and it scraped against my thing. And the scar is always here, but I don't see it and immediately go back to, do you know what I mean? Like that day when I was on the patio and then I fell and it hurt, and so now I stay away from fences and nails.
So, but
it's here.
this is where I'm going to challenge you.
What?
When you just put your scar up to the camera, you told them everything about how you got that scar, right?
Yeah.
And then your next sentence was, I don't always go back to that. But you did precisely that. You absolutely looked at the scar, reminded yourself of how exactly you got the scar, and proceeded to tell us about the rusty nail.
But I'm not in any emotional distress.
And that's the difference, right?
Behind it.
That's the difference. You can have discomfort. You can be reminded by the scar. The key is, I don't want to go back to my old trauma and the trauma response, or how I responded to. I don't want to be afraid of fences now. And because I remember, right, it doesn't mean that I'm still in the trauma space. Yeah. It just means that I remember. We want to be people who just remember where we got the scar from or the thing that happened, but it doesn't take me back to the space I was in during that trauma. I don't not trust fences anymore, but I do remember, right? And I know, like, now when I go outside, if I'm by, I'm cautious of my surroundings, and I know that if there's a sharp object around, then I walk a little bit this way. Those are the things that remind us, right, that we need to be a little bit more careful. And those things are fine. It's okay to remember. Healing is not about, like, not remembering. Yeah. Because I want to remember. I want to be more careful as I move forward. Right. And triggers are not a bad thing at all. And if we walk in this life and expect not to be triggered, then we're really lying to ourselves, because all it takes is the perfect storm of events, right? And the only thing it takes is for two or three or four things to go wrong at the same time, and then that thing for you happen, right? So I left my keys at home this morning, right? I got out and there's an accident on 85, and now I got to reroute and go through this back road to Union City or whatever to get to work. I get to work, and one of my veterans did something crazy, and now I got to meet with him instead of how my usual day was supposed to go. And then um, I get a text from an ex or somebody that triggers me from that old thing. And what if that's the fourth thing for me that puts me right back in the place of my trauma? It's really about recognizing what your triggers are, right? And for me, a lot of times it's about the amount of things that can go wrong in my day before I feel like I want to go back to, old behaviors and that type of thing. And if I sit here and say that the only way that I can say that I'm healed is if I'm never triggered by this thing again, then I do myself a disservice. And I'm also just telling a lie, because you can be triggered by things. It's about how you cope when you're triggered.
You trying to make me fall in love with you? You see
I
how
should hope.
he preaching to me? That was good. That was a whole word, and all bullshit aside, like that was good, and I hear you, and I understand what you're saying, especially the thought about it might not be about that one thing. It could be about all the combination of whatever is happening to you beforehand. And I know you and I talk a good bit about one of the things that we have in common is like a control issue, and so any number of things that are like out of control for us could like really trigger us to like try to control like this one thing. And I can understand how like a trigger, a small thing, if all of these other things are out of control, and this one thing, like the milk is left out overnight, can just like,
oh, you gonna use that one?
make us flip the table. Well, that's not an issue we've had, but you know what I mean? For example, like all these other things and like this one tiny thing at the house is like what makes us flip the tables. Okay, so then how do we know? And I'm this feels self-explanatory, and I'm sure you just talked through it a little bit, but for the sake of the conversation, how does somebody know when they've been triggered? How do they know, to take it back to the quote, when I'm hysterical, it's historical. How do they know that their response in the moment is about something else?
So to me, I know that I've been triggered, and I tried to put this in the definition as well. When I leave the present,
yeah,
what I'm supposed to be focused on, what I'm supposed to be doing, and I go back to this thing. So it triggered something from my past.
yeah,
Right. And when I leave this present moment and go back to that thing and start trying to reprocess this thing that I cannot change. Right. And when I'm triggered and go back there, I'm going back to the past. This is not back to the future. I cannot go back there and change this thing that happened. I cannot change the outcome. I cannot retry myself for this same crime that I may be guilty of, because I brought it on myself, because, I was operating in
who you were at the time,
who I was at the time. Right. I was doing the best that I could with the knowledge that I had at that time. Right. I can't go back and retry myself for those things over again, because I was triggered by this thing that came up.
Yeah.
So when I leave the present, when I abandon everything else that I said that I want to be focused on, present and future, and go back, then I'm triggered.
That's real. And that makes sense. It's basically you're no longer operating in the present, which could happen, especially unexpectedly.
And a lot of times that's really what it's about. Like we at my day job, of course, we do we have the veterans do like recovery plans.
Yeah.
And in some sense, we all do like our own personal recovery plans, and how we're going to address things if we should come back across this type of thing. But a lot of times we do it in a very unhealthy way. We will say, I'm never going to do X, Y, and Z for a person again. So I don't have to.
I'm never going to this place again.
Right.
Or, yeah.
And even our folks who have substance abuse issues, their primary thing that they say is, I'm going to avoid these people, places, and things.
Yeah.
Right. And our reality is that avoidance is like the worst thing that you can do.
Yeah.
Because you can avoid. A lot of times you have to deal with things.
Can't run from your past.
Yeah. Right. Or, as my frat brothers would say, running from it will not save you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be ready to deal with that thing when you come in contact with it, because you will. And if you're really out here praying prayers of growth and asking to be better, go run into that thing.
Yeah.
And it'll be about how you deal with it when you run into it. What your strength looks like when you run into that thing. If you're able to say, I need to go a different way.
Yeah.
I'm not triggered by this anymore. I'm able to do something different, or I'm not triggered enough to allow this thing to control me and take me back to where I was.
Yeah.
I want to do something different in this moment, and I can walk away from this situation, or I have a better way to cope.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I never want to talk to people ever again because this thing happened. It's just something different. But triggers can do you like that, and they can be tricky.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Like when people say because they've been hurt, they're never going to be in another relationship, or yeah.
And I think a part of the haze with being able to identify our triggers is, I know from this aspect of, who I am and who I was raised to be as a man, we were always raised to believe that, the more that we can take on, the stronger we are, the more of a man, we are. If I'm able to deal with one thing, two things, three things, four things, the more I can pile on, it means that I'm stronger. The more contact I can have with my trigger, then that means that I'm stronger.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we set ourselves up for failure with that type of mentality, because we have to have appropriate ways to cope with our triggers when we come in contact with them. Like, what do I do in this moment? Like, if I'm dealing with something as it relates to how I feel about body positivity and that kind of thing, I have to lean into that, but I also have to be strong enough to know that I was just triggered by this particular thing, but I'm not going to allow this trigger to control me and take me to a really dark place that I can really, that I can go to. So what do I do in those moments? So a lot of times for me, it's affirmations. A lot of times for me, it's, talking to myself about myself and saying positive things about myself in those moments. And it could take me in my worst days, it could take me to eating binge or something else to where I'm just like, I'm not making progress. I'm gonna throw all this stuff away. I'm gonna do something totally different and just kind of go back to my dark.
Because why does it even matter?
Because why does it even matter?
Yeah.
Like, what am I even doing this for? Like, it all sucks. It doesn't matter. But when I encounter that trigger and I'm able to talk myself off the ledge with positivity and say that, you're worth it, you're worthy, we can do something different in this moment, then I can keep trucking and moving along the path that I have. But when that trigger hits me and it takes me out of my present, sometimes I have to just catch myself, right? So that I can change the direction.
Yeah. I'm sitting here trying to think about, what is the haze of triggers for me? And I think I said it earlier in the conversation, primarily it's just that, God, I'm back here. Like, I've been around this block a couple times already, and I gotta go. I'm back through it. That is annoying to me because, I want to just be done with the thing. And then I think also part of that, as I'm talking through it, could be just like, am I doing it wrong then? Am I doing healing wrong? So, I kind of am a little type A, and like, I want to know that I'm doing the thing right in a spirit of excellence. So am I missing something? Am I, have I not fully let it go? Have I not fully forgiven myself? Have I not fully forgiven that person? Have I not fully forgiven the situation? What why am I back here is kind of where I go to. And that's definitely a haze, because then it kicks off me just being in my head, which is not the best place to be, because then I can tell myself all these stories. The enemy is the accuser of the brethren. Like, so like the stories you tell yourselves were like sometimes our own worst enemies. So for me, it is like, one, I'm back here. Did I not do it right? Like, what am I missing in the healing? But I think what has helped me in the moments when I've been able to acknowledge or recognize that actually this is some old stuff that I'm being triggered by, it helps me to name it and just say it out loud.
And that's the thing. What? That's the thing, right? So when we talk about what the haze is and being able to identify triggers, right? We say all these big words, but really what we want to be able to do is call a thing. Yeah. Right. And when, for me, I give myself permission to like zoom out, right, and look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that, and we can't have this podcast and say that healing and wholeness are a journey and not a destination, but then convict ourselves for not being done with the thing, right? Yeah. And so
not having arrived. Yeah.
You're not going to arrive. Mm-hmm. There is, and we've talked about being habitual students, perpetual learners, right? Yeah. And a part of like being in recovery from anything, right? Pursuing your wholeness with anything is that idea that I'm going to have to learn new ways, right? Better ways to cope. Yeah. Right. I want to be better than I was on yesterday. The same thing that worked for me in 2018 as it relates to healing, it may not necessarily work now. Yeah. So I have to do something different. I have to be willing to do something different. I have to be willing to learn new things. Yeah. And if I'm not, when those triggers pop up, I'm in my head, I'm thinking, got something for that ass. Mm-hmm. Right. I know you, I see you, but you're not gonna take me back to that space. And I'm willing to try this new thing that might work for me better than some old things that I have. Yeah. But holding yourself to this impossible standard that if I'm whole and I'm healed, then I'll never deal with this again. It's wrong, and it keeps us in a space of bondage, basically.
But that's how we, as a people, as a society, I can't really say if it's just our community or not, but think about if you try to talk about a thing, or think about when we talk about, our nephew, for example, talking about like bringing up stories about an ex repeatedly, be like, you still talking about that thing? So we like do it to each other, even like doing it to myself as a society. We're like, oh, you're still on that? That was X number of years ago, or that was whatever. So I can see, how we are taught to think that like you forgive, you get over, and if you don't revisit it. And I guess the headline here is that that's not real, that it could come back around, and it can keep coming back around. But then back to how we navigate it, calling it out, calling the thing. And sometimes I'm not even able to understand that it's past until I've been able to process it. So I always got to have a moment to like just reflect and be like, what is this? Sometimes I know immediately, like, I remember feeling this way when I was in this situation X number of years ago. And I'm feeling this situation is making me feel that way again. It helps to maybe think about what I need in that moment so that the situation is different. When you and I talk through our past triggers, like this thing triggered me from a past relationship, we actually talk about, okay, what's the thing we could do differently? And I think that we already have like an assumption of good intent. So that's helpful. And there's always trust. There's already trust there. So that's helpful. But then just us talking about what we need in that moment, I think is really helpful. What else? Anything else you can think of in terms of like navigating through triggers?
For me, even when you think about, and I'm going back to circling back around to the thing with our nephew. I think sometimes, like, even when we give him grief, right? When you think about the principle of like having grace, right? So having grace for him, a lot of times we can't have grace for him because in those moments we don't have grace for ourselves.
That's real.
If we're being honest, the one thing about my nephew now, he's going to be honest, right? And so if something makes him think of a place or a situation, he'll just say that. It may be about my father who passed away. It may be about some past relationship thing. It may be about something with, his biological dad. It may be about any of those things. He's gonna be honest about that thing in that moment. And I think a lot of times our care and concern for people is like, let me talk this person off the ledge. Like, don't think about that. Like, think about your future. But we can't extend grace to other people for those things a lot of times because we don't give that grace to ourselves first. And you have to, before you can really be a purveyor of grace for real, you have to be able to give it to yourself. And if we don't give ourselves grace to be able to have these triggers and experience these things that remind us of bad spaces in our lives or whatever, then we can't imagine really giving it to anyone else. Right. Because we won't allow it for ourselves. We believe a lot of times that being over it is the thing. That's how you can move forward. That's what healing looks like. And it's not being over. It's about being able to recognize what my triggers are and the thing that it may trigger for me and how I deal with it as it comes. Right. That makes me more prepared to move forward in healthier ways. So I can recognize those triggers because the thing that happened to me, it happened. There's nothing that I can do about it to change it. And do I know what my trigger looks like? And do I recognize the space that it can take me back to and have enough wherewithal and enough determination not to want to go back to that space to be able to stop that thing in the moment, to deal with my automatic thoughts? Because my automatic thoughts can be a stone cold killer. My automatic thoughts be like, oh, death and despair, agony. It's over.
It's trap. Like,
it's over.
I coughed. Right? I might have cancer.
Right. I get that from my mama, by the way. You got a new form of cancer. It's over for you. Doctors haven't discovered it yet, but you haven't. My mama gonna see this and cuss us out. But anyway, we just have to know, like, it's a combination too of like our upbringing and things that we were brought up to believe, of course, our personal beliefs, the experiences that we've had, all of those things kind of will take us back to those places and they can elicit a positive, response to a trigger and just cause us some discomfort, or it can, elicit a trauma response to where, we go to our deepest and darkest places and want to just hide from that thing because we don't trust ourselves enough to be around it.
And as we always say here, like, we are firm believers in, just in terms of additional ways to navigate through it, find you somebody in your corner, a therapist, ideally. If you need more than one to support you in different areas of your life, I think that's perfectly great too. Sometimes it could be a mentor. Sometimes it could be a loved one, family member, or friend. I think it's best if it were a professional, but everybody's in a different journey with their relationship with therapy, but it helps so much just in terms of, I think for me, what it really, really helps with is helping you to see yourself in terms of process through what's triggering you, but then connecting the dots to, it might not even be a trauma that you're responding to. It could be some thing that happened to you when you were a child, or something you saw that your parents or other family members did that you didn't even know was impacting how you're responding to things. Like, that's the biggest thing that has been helpful for me. Like, I didn't even realize, because of what I saw or learned or something as a kid, and it might not have been a bad thing. It's just like how we lived, our rules of engagement, our norms are causing me to respond in this certain way that might not be the best and highest way for me to respond according to who I am at the moment.
Or just some regular, like, these things are causing me to operate in an unhealthy way. I see some unhealthy behaviors as a result of this, or this thing continues to happen to me over and over again as a result of like the choices that I'm making. And I mean, we could all be like, is everybody else? But at some point we have to take a look at our own behavior and kind of dig through, what it looks like. And so I'm a proponent of therapy, of course, but I also believe in having like a good support network.
Yeah.
There are, like, we all have our friends, but I have a core group of one or two or three folks who really know where the bodies are buried, who really know like my stuff,
Yeah.
and they don't mind calling me on it. And I'm not saying that those particular things will always be the answer,
Yeah.
but that's the thing about having access to tools, right? To have you 4 or 5 or 6 different things that you can do when a trigger comes and knocks, right? And it doesn't have to be that I have this one way. So as I keep healing and keep along this journey to healing and to wholeness, I get new tools
Yep.
that I can access.
You have a toolbox.
And right, I have a toolbox, and then there are 6 or 7 or 8 different things that I can do, right, when my triggers come a knocking, because they coming.
Yeah.
Right, they're coming.
Yeah. And I think the other thing we haven't said here is we still all have a choice in the matter. Like sometimes we can be triggered and just react without thinking. But I think there's something to say, like, we have a choice about who we want to become and making choices towards that. So I can say, you know, I want to be the type of person that responds in this way when these types of things happen to me. And then doing whatever work it calls for to be that person, to become that person. So I don't want us to sit here and be like, you're going to be triggered by your past events. You don't have any control about it. And this is how you deal with it when it happens. It's like, actually, no, we all have a choice about how we respond, who we're becoming, how we act our lives. And I think we said this in a recent episode as well. You know, our lives are just a culmination of choices that we've made. So we can continue, you know, to make choices, based on who we want to be and how we want to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, reflections, or resources on triggers?
A whole bunch more thoughts. I think they'll still continue to come up.
Yeah.
And we'll, have some more information to share. And I think that's really, the space that we're moving into is about being able to not feeling like you got to stand still when you're in the process of healing, right? Because the healing is going to be a journey. It's going to be an ongoing process. And just being able to access like new tools and give yourself permission to learn new things along the way, and even learn new things about yourself. I think about it in terms of like seeing one of your favorite movies over and over again. When you have watched Love Jones for the 50th time, and you'd be like, I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah.
Like that new thing. Like I missed that the first time around. Yeah. I missed this. Right. That's the idea of being like a habitual student to me. Like being able to see your situation and see it from a different perspective, to where it doesn't hurt you, but think about, I hadn't thought about it this way before. Let me look at like this particular thing.
That's my favorite thing to experience, if I'm being honest. Like whenever I've been challenged or inspired, even preferably inspired, but I think inspiration is also a challenge to think differently. That's just like, that's my favorite thing ever. And so I think that's one of my favorite things about therapy too, is like they're really inspiring change of thought, which that's what it's all about. Yeah. So what about, we come to that time in our conversation when we always bring it back to music. What is the music for this moment?
So the music for this moment for me is Toby Nwigwe.
We love him.
We love Toby and Fat, his wife.
Yeah.
His song called Make It Home is the music for the moment for me. And the first part of the song says, I hope you catch a wave that doesn't subside. And when you think about how waves come about, they kind of start with a ripple way out in the ocean. As they come in to shore, they crest. And eventually they come back down once they crest. And this idea that I hope you catch a wave, I hope that you find peace and joy and love that crest and never has to subside. And that's just so powerful for me. Like those few little words, like I hope you catch a wave that doesn't subside. Right. And I think that the internal work that we do will help us catch a wave that doesn't subside. Like we can have the ability to be riding a wave and our peace not leave us, right? Our love not leave us, our joy not leave us, and us to be lacking nothing. Another part of the song says, I hope that your streets are paved with gold, and I hope you make it home. So, man, that's the music for the moment. That song just does something to my spirit, man. So
take you to church real quick.
Take me to church real quick. But music does that for us often. So that's why we have music for the moment. And check it out.
Absolutely. I love that. I see you got some resources over here. Are we missing anything?
The resources I was gonna recommend. I know you had your book. Do you want to mention your book again?
Well, it's not necessarily about triggers, but the book by Tracy McMillan is why you're not married yet, the straight talk you need to get the relationship you deserve. I read it years ago, but I do remember it being like, if you acting like this, that's why you're probably not in a relationship. So it was really, causing folks to at least have me looking in the mirror like, am I doing any of this? And so I think it'd be really cool just in terms of checking out, see if you're doing any of those things, and maybe just check out the show and see some of the nuggets that they're dropping in those sessions.
And for me, I was gonna recommend Charlamagne the Guy's book, Shook One, Anxiety Playing Tricks on Me. Where he talks a lot about like where his anxiety came from, and how he learned to recognize it, and how he deals like on an ongoing basis with his anxiety. I think sometimes, and we didn't talk a lot about this during, this conversation, was just like how our triggers sometimes when we recognize them, they can be anxiety producing, and a lot of times just the thought of being triggered. Like I was just talking to my therapist this past Friday, just about the thought of even being triggered. I like to try to be so ahead of it that I be taking myself down that road. Like, okay, am I going to be prepared if this happens and this happens and this happens? Like, how will I respond? And that can produce anxiety.
What she tell you to do?
She basically told me to get my shit together and stop worrying about stuff.
And she told you to get out your head and get a hobby.
Right. Get out of my head and get a hobby. She also told me to tell my wife to buy me this $500 remote control car. She didn't say that. But anyway, we got to deal with all of it. Yeah. So that's my resource.
Yeah. Love it. When I'm hysterical.
It's historical.
But we just talked through how to navigate through some of it. And that's a wrap for this conversation. It was a good one. That fed me, quite honestly. So in parting, like we always say, life will always present us with the haze, but all of us, have everything that we need to navigate through it.
And just so you remember, you're not alone.
You're not.
We invite you to join us next time, and we'll take the journey together. Hope to have y'all back soon. Thanks for joining us. Peace. Why'd you take so long to come through? Oh, baby. And love. Tell me, were you hiding from me all the time? Each time.